All right, so I hope the first video didn't scare you away because we are back for part two. This is where we're going to learn a little bit about the visual appearances. So I'm going to talk a little bit about, like the theories about how things should be presented and how they should look. We're going to play around with adjusting very simple things like the font size, the color of the font. We can use italics and bold, and there's a lot of other cool things that we can play around with on here to make just the visual appearance look good. If you remember the last video, we looked at the Girl Scout cookie sales. Well, this is the same sheet before I decided to add any sort of color and organization and spacing and all these different things that really do make a difference when it comes to, just making sure that we are just keeping a professional look and making everything look nice and neat. So at first glance, we kind of look at this. It looks kind of boring. It looks kind of plain. Nothing is too problematic yet, except I'm kind of looking at like these streets, and they're all cut off by the end of the cell. What happened here? How do we fix that? How do we make it so that everything looks nice and neat? So let's first talk about that. Let's first talk about the columns, and we'll also talk about the rows, how we can adjust each of those things. So first off, the columns. And rows, basically if you click on the one that you want, I use that for a visual, you don't have to, but you notice when I put the mouse between them, you get those two little arrows. These allow us to change the width or the spacing between it. For myself, I like to kind of grab or highlight the column that I'm playing with and then do the adjustment. It's just kind of a particular thing that I like to do, but I'm going to stretch each of these out so it looks nice, neat, and presentable. I know the streets are usually a longer piece of data, so we're going to stretch that out. There we go. City, same thing. I want to make sure at least all of my cities have the width that is needed. State, I'm going to actually shrink that a little bit because it's only 2 letters. All right, zip code, it's kind of good where it is. Maybe give it a tiny bit more space. Thin mints, well, the titles are being cut off, so that doesn't look very great. And again, I'm just playing around with this to try to make it look as best as it can to my liking. This is not something that you have to like absolutely perfect. It's something that you more get better at later on down the road. No one's going to take a ruler and kind of like measure your cell width and be like, oh, this is not equal all the way across, so it's unacceptable. Make it look nice. All right, so the first thing, just kind of adjusting that. And the same thing applies for the rows. So I only see 2 rows that are of extreme importance. This Girl Scout cookie sales, I want to try to make that a nice big title. And also, these are the pieces of information that actually give us like the description, and we're going to adjust them. So I might as well give them a little bit of extra space on here. All right, so Girl Scout cookie sales. All right, notice how it kind of goes off to the other square. I didn't put the word sales in here because remember, if I shrink it, like it's right in the middle, like it's cutting between the two, and that just doesn't look very good. So what I want to do for this is, first off, we have all these cells up here at the top that are not being used. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to merge them or fuse them all together to make one giant cell. All right, and I can do that by clicking and holding and dragging my mouse all the way across to the last cell being used. Now they're all highlighted, and I want to use all of these as one single cell. So I'm going to go to Format, Merge Cells, and Merge All or Merge Horizontally. It doesn't really matter. Merge All is everything on here, or if you just want the horizontal ones, just the row to be merged, you can click that. They both do the same thing for this example. Now it's all one giant cell, and that's pretty nice. I'm looking around, I think total ordered, same idea, these two. So why don't we merge those? So Format, Merge Cells, merge them. Now it's one single cell. We don't have to put data in there, so we're okay with that for this example. Girl Scout cookies are $10 each, same idea. These 3 cells, let's merge them together as well, because we might as well while we're at it. All right. It's looking a little bit better now. We can actually see and read all the data that we need. But what we can also do is play around with, the text. All these different things, a lot of these should be really familiar to like Google Docs or Microsoft Word where you've seen them before. For example, this guy right here is the alignment. So if I click, it's on the left, that's why it's all the way to the left on the sheet. If I click right, it goes all the way over here to right. And if I click in the middle, That's starting to look pretty nice right now, okay? So maybe we want to play around with some of the alignment with our items. Maybe we want to do all of these little titles here and make them aligned in the middle. So I can click each individual one and center it. That's going to take me some time, and remember, I'm lazy. I want to get this done as quick as possible. So if I just drag all the way across and then click center, now that's starting to look a little bit better. We're getting things to look nicer and neater. We can also adjust the font size, so I'm going to click this. Let's make this 24. Ooh, that's looking nice. Okay. This is starting to look like a chart now. All right. I'm going to click on there. We also have different fonts that we can add, so I can choose any one of these like to play around with it. I'm going to go with Impact. That looks pretty cool. That looks like serious and professional and neat and things like that. We can do the same thing over here. Let's make this size 14. That stretches a little bit too far, so let's make it 12. There we go. That fits those 3 cells perfectly. Maybe we want to change that as well. That looks a little weird. Let's try that. Looking better, but I don't know. That looks pretty nice. It's Comic Sans. It's okay. It's not perfect, but it'll do what we need it to do. All right. We also have other types of alignment as well, so I can do horizontal alignment to make these align in the middle. So that's pretty neat. All right, we don't need that for total ordered, but you know, we can play around with that. And I just wanted to stretch that out a little bit. A lot of this is just like playing around with it and just seeing what you can do. So we have some other information here. All right, this is all the information on our customers. Right? Their first name, last name, street, city, state, and zip code. Usually when I think about personal information about people, for some reason I'm reminded of Facebook. Like they collect way too much information and they have all this data on what we do. So let's use some Facebook colors to color code this example here. And actually, before I do that, I'm thinking that I want to vertically align these as well. Ooh, that's looking pretty nice. Okay. So I'm going to highlight just these 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of them. I'm going to choose a fill color. This is the background color. So Facebook, I know, happens to use like, like a light blue, and then the text color right here is white. All right. These also don't look good, like, size-wise. So let's make these, how about 14? It's a little bit too big. Let's try 12. There we go. That looks pretty nice. All right, and then we can do the same thing for the cookies. All right, now most of the Girl Scout cookies tend to be like a shade of brown, so I'm going to use that. Now, what I'm thinking is, oh, okay, I'll just use that, and then I'll use like a slightly darker shade of brown, or this kind of like red color. That's not very readable. Something's not looking great with that. And this is one of those visualization things. If you put one color on top of a slightly darker color or lighter color or something like that, you're going to run into these like visualization issues. I can barely read what that says on my monitor. And that's not very good. That doesn't look professional if you have to squint your eyes to read it. So I'm going to choose also the white color again. And we'll make that size 12. And yeah, maybe I have to play around with this a little bit. I don't even like this white on this color either. What I'm going to do is I'm going to choose a color that kind of sticks out maybe. Oh, that's background right here. Let's try this yellow. That looks a little bit better, at least, I also want to add some character or emphasis to this. So I'm going to grab all of those and make them bold. And that might also mean that I have to stretch this out yet again, but that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. This is kind of like a learning process where we slowly design things over time. And if we keep applying just good ideas and we're not afraid to, make a little mistake and undo it and fix it, we can make a really, really nice looking chart. So already it's starting to come together, because when I look at this color scheme says like, hey, that's the important stuff. And we also have cost. So whenever I talk about cost, I like to use green, and why don't we use the white to stand out on it? All right, again, make it size 12. We'll make it bold. There we go. This is starting to look nice now. Okay. Girl Scout cookies up here. You know what? Let's make this just a little bit larger. Let's make the font a little bit larger. Let's try that. Ooh, that's looking pretty nice. Okay. Let's choose a background color for that. I know Girl Scouts usually have the green and white background as well. That looks pretty nice. And then we also should do something about this guy over here. So why don't we do a lighter green and, ooh, gray. That looks terrible. Okay. Let's try that white again. See if maybe if we bold it. No, that's stretching it out too far. That's not bad. That's presentable. It looks pretty nice. It doesn't have to be perfect. Again, we're not graphic designers in this course, but if you wish to apply your knowledge of those things, I think you could make some good strides with that. We can also adjust the size of this. So like, if I want to make this really wide, I could probably stretch this downward a little bit, make the pie chart a little bit larger. We can play around with moving just about anything in here as long as it looks nice and aesthetically pleasing, meaning that like the visual aspect of it, how nice it looks is something that we consider. We've already come a long way on here, just getting up to this point. Yeah, we're doing pretty darn good with it already. So now, what I'm going to look at is these totals. These guys, I like the totals to stand out a little bit, so I'm going to bold them, and I'm going to bold these as well. It's kind of like my visual view or like my look at it to see just exactly how this stuff is starting to look. All right. Cost at the same time, I'd like that to be bolded as well. And let's just go wild and make some stuff look nice and neat. All the personal information, I'm going to add italics to it. It didn't change much, but now it looks kind of like an address or like a handwritten thing. All right, let's keep adding some stuff to it. Let's take all these states, let's center them, make that look kind of neat. All right, zip code, I'm going to center that as well. We don't have to center everything, but certain things can look really nice if we just kind of, oop, I clicked something on accident. Let's highlight these guys again. Let's try centering them. All right, this is looking pretty nice right now. So, just the visual, just spending I don't know, this took me what, 15, 20 minutes tops? No, this took me 12 minutes to explain everything and explain what I was thinking. So, a little bit of design goes a long way. All right. The last thing that I want to talk to you about is just kind of like the alignment of certain things. When we align numbers, we always want them to be aligned to the right. Now, why is that? Because we want all of the ones spots to be in a perfect row, all of the tens spots, and even the hundreds spots. Because if I center this entire row, hopefully you'll immediately recognize the problem. It's really difficult to figure out if this is, $170 or $10 or 17 or, just looking at those numbers, it becomes very difficult to figure it out based on that. But if I align it to the right, oh, I should align all of them to the right. If I align it to the right, we have everything lined up and I can quickly pick any of these costs or orders that goes over $100. All right. Also, it's the cost in dollars, but shouldn't we have some sort of indication of that? Well, we can do that. If we go to the format option and number, we can click on making these appear in certain ways. So we can just leave it as a number. We can put it in a percent format. We can do an accounting amount, so we can put in different values, financial, currency rounded. This is dollars, so it's going to be one of these currencies. Let's try with the decimals on it. That's looking a lot better already. Those decimal places, since they're all $10 each, I don't really think that we have to throw in these decimals though. So if we go back into format, and I go to number, and I do currency rounded, that looks a lot nicer. So we're starting to add this level of just beauty to data. And, if we look at the beginning of this, what it looked like, it looks nothing like this. So we've done pretty well with this. We can also add some more things if we want as well. So this theme is blue up here. What if I grabbed all the information and I changed that background color to the lightest possible blue? Now we have this kind of blue connectedness that makes it look visually pleasing. I'm going to do the same thing with these. So let's change this background color. Let's choose it as the lightest possible reddish brown. And then we also have cost. Well, we might as well, let's make it a light green. So now we have some really nice organization and visual appearance of our stuff. I would say that this looks pretty darn nice. And that's really what, the first piece of this course is going to be about. When you present data, it better be like nice and organized and like all the, you want to show off your professionalism and your skills. If you looked at this chart before we added the color to it, doesn't look very good. And that's why I'm giving you that as a blank to let you experiment with adjusting the visual appearance of each of these cells. All right? You want to take your time with this. This is the first part of the assignment. All right? What we also have is a pretty cool option in something called data validation. And what this allows us to do is create different types of rules for these cells of data. If we go back to these March sales, and all of a sudden, like for example, instead of Thin Mints, instead of putting the number 2, what if I put the word 2? Things changed, right? Because if I undo it with Control Z or Edit Undo, there's 2 of them. So that gives this person 9 total items. If I change it to 2 like this, we're down to 7. This didn't get counted as the actual number. So what we can do is make sure that our data falls within certain rules, and we can put up these little like alerts or like red flags that'll tell us like, hey, something's wrong here. All right. So we're going to look at those as our second piece. What we have is list range, list items, number, text, date, and checkbox. These are almost all of the features. There's one that we're not going to dive into just because it's a little bit too much for an introductory course. If you want to pursue it on your own and play around with it, please do, because you will learn some pretty valuable skills. So what we want to do is I want to just make one of each of these cells that expects a certain type of data to be put into it, and you'll see exactly how that works on here. So the first one, we're going to go to data validation. This is a very powerful thing so that we can make sure our information doesn't get goofed up. And when I click on it, we get this window here that's going to help us grab some information. So we're going to do the cell range. That's just going to be which cell we're talking about. All right, so that means like it's a data validation sheet. Well, that's this little click sheet down here. And then at the end of it, it says A2, and that's this cell that's highlighted. So, okay, cool. We can just kind of leave that. If we ever wanted to change it, we can click on this, and we can click on certain boxes. We can also click the range. Remember when I talked about we use that colon, those 2 dots? So this is A2 through A13. Or it could be A2 B through B2, C2, D2, E2. We can extend it all the way from that way. Or we could also do it diagonally, like A2 through E15. We're just going to focus on 1 for today, though. All right? So just cell A2, list from a range. That's what we're going to keep. These are all the options. You may notice that they match up to most of these up here. All right? And then it asks us where on the sheet is that range. So I'm going to click on this box, and it's going to say, okay, well, what do you want to grab as your options? And I made this little group of things or text or animals down here: dog, cat, giraffe, alligator. Notice how I dragged to all 4 of them. All right, that's I-25 through I-28. I click OK. And now whatever's in these in this list will be the drop-down list for A2. All right. We can show a warning if it's invalid data, meaning it wasn't put in properly, or we can even reject it, and where we can have sheets just say, nope, throw it out, I don't want it. We're going to leave it at show warning for now. And we even have help text if we want to add something as well, like some information. So choose an animal. And we'll put a smiley face so we know that it's appearing properly. So when I click save, notice this little drop-down arrow came up. And I'm going to zoom in just a little bit so we can see it just a little bit better. I have a drop-down, and now I can choose from one of these 4. All right? And if I just hover over it, I should, there we go, there's that validation, choose an animal with a smiley face. We can choose whichever one we want, and now it gives us a drop-down to make life just a little bit easier to plug in. All right, now let's say I didn't want to do any of these. Let's say I put in a zebra. Notice that little red thing at the top? It's yelling at us and saying like, hey, you goofed up, because that's not on the list. All right, so that's our first one. The next one we have is list items. So again, to make this cell with data validation, drop down, data validation, and now we're going to leave this cell range because I had it highlighted, so it's fine. Click on this and list of items. And now inside of this list, we can add whatever we want as items to be chosen from, so we don't like eat up space on our, basically our Google Sheets or our spreadsheet. So maybe I wanted to put what grade are you in? So 9, 10, 11, 12, and we'll put in a little bit of help. Enter your grade level. We'll save it, and again we get the drop down, and these are the ones that we typed in. All right, and if somebody accidentally types in 8, again it's going to yell at us, and we got to click the drop down and do one that's the proper version of it. All right, we're going to move on to the next one, which is number. So again, number gives us data validation. Scroll down, there's number. Okay, we can choose a range. So I could say between 0 and 100. Let's say that we're doing it because the teacher wants to plug in grades. So that way we can save it. All right, we can enter any number that we want. And because we have that validation rule, let's say a teacher accidentally types in that because they were just typing really quick on the keys and they, accidentally pressed the button too many times. Now we get that little alert at the top again, and it will tell us like, hey, you goofed up, you put in something wrong. So, even back before like grade book software and things like that, teachers would run spreadsheets to hold their grades, and it would do all the calculations. Just like the Girl Scout cookie thing, all the information would update. And we can make grade books and things like that in this course. All right. It's pretty nice. So let's just go back to that though. There were some other options. So if I go back to data validation, well, this guy's selected. Choose a number, that's what we wanted. Between, not between. So you can say it's outside of that range. Less than, or equal to. So you can even leave like, if people wanted to put in like certain numbers, you could cut them off at a certain level. Greater than or equal to, not equal to. So you can even make it so they have to type in a specific number, or if it's not equal to specific numbers as well. So for example, you couldn't put in like a negative, or like not equal to 0, like you just reject the zeros or things like that in any sort of spreadsheet. So that's pretty cool. And we can also, let's say we didn't want to put it in, we can just click remove validation, and it completely removed it, and we can type in literally anything that we want. All right, if I remove that, one last thing on here I want to show you. Data validation, we'll make it a number. Let's say between 1 and 11, doesn't really matter. If I type in the word cat, I'm also going to get some sort of weird thing yelling at me. All right, so we'll just leave that at 3 to make Google Sheets happy. We can also plug in data validation, text, contains, does not contain, equals, is valid email, is valid URL. These are cool because you can actually force them not only to make it as text, and you can make certain like, rules or things like that. You can lock out like curse words or things like that. You have to make it a specific thing that it's equal to. A valid email, we can plug it in. So let's try that. So email, let's say I ask for your email and I'm like, oh, it's brianfadouk@gmail, and I forget to put the .com, it kind of yells at you. Or let's say I even forgot the @gmail and try to press enter. It's like, I don't know what that email is. But once you put @gmail.com, it says, oh, yep, we're good. I will accept that. And it doesn't just have to be Gmail. It could be stupid made up email.com, and that is still acceptable because it has an @ in it, and it has a .com or .net or whatever else emails have at the end of them. That's also a feature that you can plug into this. And the same thing works for links too. Like the link has to be like something valid. So if you ask somebody for like a specific website or a resource or a news article where they got their information from, you could force them to validate or keep that link up and running. All right, we're just gonna crank out the rest of these as well. So under date, I can click data, data validation, a date. We can check to make sure it's a valid date, it's equal to a specific day, it's before, on or before, after, on or after, just like greater than, less than, and equal, greater than or equal to, and that kind of stuff. You can put date ranges where you force them to type in information between 2 dates, or even not between those dates. I'm just going to make it a valid date so I can show off one other feature of this. So I save it, and I have to type in a date, but here's the cool thing. I double click, and I have a drop down now for the calendar. so I can drop in things. For example, our first day of school is September 8th. All right, and I can't put in something like next Tuesday. It says, nope, that's not a valid date. It has to be an actual date of information. All right, and the last thing that we're going to look at is the checkbox. Checkboxes are pretty cool. Go to data validation, checkbox, and we can also use custom cell values. We'll look at that in a second, but let's just try this right now. Ooh, we got that little square, and we can check it and not check it. Now, if you know anything about computer science or you've heard about anything about computers with binary, like ones and zeros, that computer language, if this is unchecked, it's a false because it's like a zero, there's nothing there, all right? But if I check it and look at it, it comes up as true. Now with this checkbox, this is where that data validation thing comes into play. So I'm going to go back to my data validation, take a look at it, use custom cell values. So if it's checked, it could be yes, and if it's unchecked, it could be no. Now when we save it, it's checked. Instead of true, it takes the value of yes. If I uncheck it and look at it, it has no as an option. So these are some cool ways that we can actually force our data to do specific things. What's nice about this is yes and no. You know, we could have somebody type in something like yeah, or they could type in absolutely or positively or anything else like that, and they could actually, like, you know, try to answer things correctly. But later on, we're going to be able to look at our data based on if it's a yes or a no. Yeah or absolutely or positively doesn't really work because we're only looking for a specific word. And we don't want to try to think of every possible word that somebody could say to try to say yes or no. We just present them with a checkbox and they can either check it or they can uncheck it. And that makes life a lot easier for us. All right, so that's 1.2. This is kind of like your tutorials or things to play around with. So there's going to be some challenges that you're going to be building. Specifically, you're going to go back to this Girl Scout cookie sales, and you're going to be designing it on your own. On top of that, we also have April sales. I want you to use some data validation. You're going to be doing a couple things. But for the most part, I want you to make these all to be a drop-down so that instead of you typing in a number, because if you accidentally type in like that, when you're trying to type in 7, you're like, oh, I accidentally hit the 6. You don't want to put me down for 76 boxes of s'mores. I think 75 s'mores is my limit on what I'll purchase. But, you know, I could be convinced to buy one more box. Kidding. But anyway, you know, you want to make it so that they have a drop down so it's between 0 and, let's say, 9 of them, because maybe you want to limit them per customer or something like that. All right? So that is pretty much this little chapter and this little activity. After this, we're going to move on to some more advanced stuff involving spreadsheets. So give this a try. Make sure your Girl Scout cookie sales system looks nice and neat. If you really must use, you know, my formatting, my color schemes, and everything else like that, it's good practice, so I won't be insulted. But I'd like you to kind of like invent it and make it your own in a way, because a lot of this course is, you know, do things that are important and valuable to you, you know, add your own touch of style to it, because only you can make this a fun and engaging course if you put in the effort like that. All right, so that's about it for this chapter, and I'll see you guys in the next video.